Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the UBC Master of Data Science Program Admissions Panel Discussion. I'm Milad Maymay, and I'm the Director of Program Operations and Student Management for the Master of Data Science Vancouver campus program. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that the UBC Vancouver Point Grey and Okanagan campuses are situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam and Syilx people. We recognize you are all joining us today from many places, near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. In this Zoom call, all three UBC Master of Data Science programs are represented. These are the MDS Vancouver campus program, the MDS Okanagan program, and the MDS in Computational Linguistics, which is also on the Vancouver campus. All three programs are currently accepting applications, and our application deadlines are January 31st to 2023. UBC MDS Computational Linguistics has another deadline, which we'll probably get into in this call. As you can see, I have three other gentlemen here with me, and I would like to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves and tell you which program they represent and what they do. So maybe we'll start with Jeff.
Sure. Thanks, Milad. I'm Dr. Jeff Andrews. I'm an Associate Professor of Statistics at UBC Okanagan campus and Principal Co-Director of the MDS program here. I do research in unsupervised learning with statistical models.
Thanks, Jeff. Mika?
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Mika Silverberry. I'm an Assistant Professor at the Department of Linguistics here at UBC and also an instructor in the MDS program. I work on many language-related tasks, so I do some work in machine translation, and especially for sort of morphologically complex languages, some of the indigenous languages of Canada. And then I also work on something called computational morphology, where we teach computers to deal with long word forms.
Thanks, Mika. And Yoel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Joel, and I'm an assistant professor of teaching at the stats department. I work for MDS in the Vancouver campus program, and I don't do any research on myself, and instead I focus on teaching only. And my background is actually in biomedical sciences, but then I pivoted during my PhD to do more data science and teaching.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So today we're going to be discussing your admissions and application questions. So when you signed up for this panel discussion, you had the opportunity to submit questions in advance. And I have these questions in front of me, and I will pose them to our panelists. But if time permits, we'll also try to answer some of your questions live. So if you have any questions, you can enter them in the Q&A section of Zoom, and hopefully we can get to most of them. Just so you know, if you're interested in finding out more about what the MDS programs are like from other former students in the program or alumni in the program, you can also view our panel discussions which we had with our alumni a few weeks ago. Maybe one of our colleagues who's working in the background can put those links in the chat for you. So those are recorded sessions that we had a few weeks ago. So we only have an hour, so without further ado, let's get into your questions. And the first set of questions have to do with application and admissions details. So maybe I'll start with this one. What qualities in prospective students is the MDS program looking for? So anybody can jump in. Jeff?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. What we're looking for when we're reviewing the applications are people with enthusiasm for data science in general, and sort of various backgrounds, and we actually know a large variety to the various programs, but I guess I'm speaking specifically for the Okanagan campus. So obviously it's a competitive program. We get a lot of applications and the spots are limited. And so it's highly competitive from a sort of usual grad school standpoint with, you know, GPA and other sort of interesting background and projects and whatnot. But we're really looking for things that are aimed towards data science in that background, whether it's in industry or projects and things like that.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I could maybe add. So we're looking for the same things as the MDSV program as well, the things that Jeff just mentioned, but we also want our students to have an interest in language. And if you can show that through, let's say, any projects that you've done in your undergrad or perhaps some work experience, that's great. But in your application, it should be sort of clear that you have an interest in language and working with language data.
Joel, anything to add?
Not that much. Maybe just emphasizing that we're not necessarily looking for like statistics and computational backgrounds. You can come from any background and just have an interest in expanding your current knowledge with data science skills. We'll try to assess if we think you are suitable for the program based on the prereqs, previous work experience, and you showing some type of quantitative like interest, but you don't have to be from a statistics or computational background. And one more thing I would say is that we are looking for really well-written, to the point and clear personal statements. So please make sure that it comes out in your personal statement why you want to take MDS and why you think you're suitable for that.
Great, thank you. So you already answered my next question, which was if not having an undergrad in computer science or stats is a disadvantage. And so the answer is we are looking for people with all kinds of backgrounds, so not just computer science and stats. But do you think it's an advantage to have a background in computer science or statistics?
I can say something there. I think there are some prerequisites courses that you need. There's an advantage to have those, definitely. Beyond that, yeah, if you've done a little bit just on your own or like have an interest where you've read a little bit, that might be a slight advantage because you will kind of start off the program a little bit softer. That said, I don't think it's necessarily a big advantage in the application process itself.
Great, I see a couple of nods. Oh yeah, Mika?
Yeah, I would also say that in the application process, it's not an advantage, definitely. I think students who have strong coding skills tend to have an easier time in the program, especially sort of at the start of the program. But then, let's say in the spring, it sort of gets equally hard for everybody because, the material just gets harder. But I would say if you can practice your coding before entering the program, that could be something that is worthwhile.
Great, thank you. Yes, and on our website, we actually have statistics on what background students come into the program with. So maybe Vanessa, working in the background, can post that link for students, so you can see that we get students from with a background in computer science or statistics, but we also get students with a background in natural sciences, arts, engineering, business. So you'll see that in the program we have students with all kinds of different backgrounds. And actually that's, I think, a strength of the program. So you get to learn from different people with different backgrounds. Okay, so the next question is, what are some ways applicants can make their application stand out? Especially, what are some actionable things you'd suggest over a short period of time? So I guess a two-part question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump back, I guess, to my earlier answer in some sense, but especially for applicants that don't appear to have a clear quantitative background beyond the prerequisites, We usually like to see that they've been, either working on projects in their domain that have some data science elements to them. Playing around on Kaggle competitions, things like that. Just sort of making it clear that there's a reason why that they're trying to gain the skills that we're teaching in the program, and they're starting in that direction a little bit themselves. Those are usually the ones that stand out a bit to me, anyway.
Thanks, Jeff.
And I can add to that we have also added a spot in the application where you can add a link to some of your work this year. So that is definitely something that can make you stand out if you have a solid project, or if you put in a video. I think we also recommend of you kind of going through and showing both like comprehension and clarity on a topic. Those are important things, as well as that personal statement and making sure that's coherent and to the point.
Yeah, I guess I could just sort of reiterate what I said earlier, namely that we do like to see people, or we want to admit people who are interested in language. So if you can make that show in your personal statement, that's a very good thing.
Great, thank you. When the admissions committee looks at applications, there's different things that the admissions committee looks for in an application. So the prereqs, the GPA, the resume, the letter of intent, the references, IELTS and TOEFL scores. What is the approximate weighting of the various components of the application? For example, resume versus experience versus personal statement versus references, etc. Or are applications assessed on a more holistic basis?
I can start there. So we don't have a strict weighting for the different parts. We are doing more of a holistic assessment. That said, there are some requirements. For example, the prereqs, of course, they need to be there to at least to some extent. But other than that, we don't have a predetermined weighting, but there are still things that you can make up for. I guess if you don't have any of the prereqs, yes, maybe if you have excellent work experience, but that would be like really hard to make up for in general.
Jeff or Mika, anything to add?
Yeah, not a ton to add, but I guess just reiterate the same thing, that we don't work with any specific weightings on these things on our admissions side at the Okanagan. We do check the prereqs because it's such a competitive program, like Joel was sort of getting at there. It's pretty tough to get past those prereqs, if not impossible. That's basically a check off, see if they've got it, and then we kind of review the rest of it on a holistic basis, like you said.
Yeah, I guess our process is very similar. So we also review applications on a more holistic basis. We do sort of also emphasize those prereqs, and I would say also maybe good grades in at least the programming prerequisite. That's something that for me, I feel more sort of confident admitting someone who did well in their coding course.
Great, thank you. So yes, when I talk to prospective students, I always say that the application should tell a story about you. So it has to be well put together. So from everything that you put in, that you upload and that you put in your application, it has to show a complete story of why you want to apply for the program and why you want to study data science. So yes, it's very holistic, I would say. So the next question, so everyone talked about letter of intent or personal statement. So what makes a good or stellar personal statement?
That it's personal. So yeah, I mean, we're reading through a lot of applications for this program, and the ones that stand out that are actually very focused on things that they've done and the backgrounds of the person, and why it is that they're now looking at data science as their career path, and why it is that they want to come to us for that part of their career path, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I read a letter of intent or personal statement, I'm trying to understand what you want to get out of MDS and what MDS can get from you. So both the motivation of why you think you are like a good candidate for MDS, and just to be clear, that's not you reiterating your entire CV or resume. You can like pick 1, 2, maybe 3 things you want to highlight and weave them in with your motivation, so I understand where you're coming from. And then also talking about why MDS, like why is that a particular program you want to take? Why are you interested in data science? And why do you think it is at UBC that you will like really be lifted up and learn the things that you want to learn?
I think that's a really great point. I mean, sort of explaining what you want to get out of the program. That's sort of important.
Yes, just to add to that, from my experience, you're not applying for a job here. So as Joel said, we don't want to get a list of everything that you've done and everything that you know. We're actually more interested in knowing if you've identified any gaps in your background, and that's why you want to study MDS. So that's probably a little bit more interesting for the admissions committee than a list of everything that you've done and all the things that you've studied or done in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Can I add here, Milad? Just
yes,
one
of course.
thing also, I know if you already have like an extensive CS or statistic background, it is really important that we see in your letter of intent why you want to do more data science.
Yeah.
Because as we said, we want to understand why you want to come to the MDS program. And sometimes it can be hard when students just generally say, I want to learn more data science. And it seems like they have taken the topics that the program cover. So really make sure that you are like personal and specific in your motivation of why you want to study in MDS.
Yes, great point. Thanks, Joel. Oops. So this is with relation to something that we already talked about, but I noticed that there is an optional box to put in a link to an online portfolio or a short video. Is there a preference whether with or without this input will be better for the application? Joel, I think you mentioned that question on the application.
Yeah. So I think we decided to make that optional. And if you are confident that you don't need it because everything else is completely stellar, fine, you don't need to include it. If you want to add that as a chance to stand out and you have a project where you think, I'm really proud of this showcases my skills, and it would be useful for the admissions committee to see this, then please add it. Like I would love to see some videos and projects that tells me more about this applicant, and that would, I think, for me, make it easier to assess if they are a good fit for the program.
Great, thank you. So the next question is about deadlines, I think. So will applications be reviewed by rounds or one time at the end? Is there any difference between applying early or late? I think maybe the 3 programs, or at least CL, does it a little bit different. So maybe Mika, you can start and talk about the CL process.
Yeah, we do sort of a couple of maybe rounds of review. I don't think there really is a difference in applying early or late. So I would recommend that you sort of work on your application until you think it is done. Yeah, we had sort of one round which just closed. That was December 4th. So yeah, the next or the final deadline for the applications is on January 31st. Yeah.
We on the Okanagan campus will be starting our review rounds, if you want to call them that, with the applications that are on hand probably in the next 2 weeks, just before the break. And we're expecting probably that the initial round of offers that are going out is probably going to be in mid-January. And then we'll sort of continue as things sort of roll in from there.
Yeah, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about MDS Vancouver process. So basically what we do is we start reviewing applications, and we take, depending on how many we have at the end, we take about 100 each week, randomly review them and send out offers. Then the next week we do another 100, randomly picked, send out offers. And the next week we do another 100 until we're done. So there is really no advantage, submitting early or late, because we just pick randomly 100 applications and review them and then send out offers to those who are excellent. Great. The next question, it is for more international students. Under what circumstances can the English language proficiency requirement be waived? I can answer that if people are okay. Okay, so if you have, if your previous degree is from an English-speaking, from a university or college or institution where English was the language of instruction, then you do not need an English language proficiency test, which is IELTS or TOEFL. But if that's not the case, then we do require IELTS or TOEFL score as part of your application. I think that's clear. Anything to add? Okay. How about GRE scores? Do we accept that?
I think I've seen them mentioned on some applications, and we might notice them if they're in there, but we don't specifically require it or look for it or question when it's not there or anything like that.
Yes, I think that's a clear answer as well. I don't think, yeah, Mika?
Yeah, we don't require them either. If your GRE score is very good, then of course it might sort of be beneficial, but yeah, we don't require that.
Yep, great. Can the application fee be waived?
I can mention that I don't think we waive them for anything, but there are scholarships that you can apply to. And I mean, Milad, maybe you can fill in if I get this wrong, but we do have scholarships both in terms of academic excellence that you can get if we think you really have an outstanding application. And there are also scholarships if you have, there are bursaries directly from UBC if you're domestic and have financial need. And I think those are the two main paths. But yeah, Milad, feel free
yeah.
to.
Yeah, there is a specific question about scholarships that is coming up, so maybe we'll talk about those a little bit later, more in detail. But about the application fee, so when you submit your application, there's a fee that you need to pay, and we cannot waive the fee, but there is a list of countries where the fee is automatically waived. And I will ask the people working in the background on this call to post a link of that list of countries in the chat. There it is. So if you're applying from one of these countries, automatically the system will waive the fee for you. Great. There is a question about asylum seekers. It's very specific, but it says, can asylum seekers apply? And the answer to that is yes. So more questions about international students. Oh, actually, there is a follow-up question about when we do the random selection of applications and then send out offers every week. Does this happen after the due date or before? So that happens very close to the deadline of January 31st. If people have submitted their application and it's complete, which includes, all the references have been submitted, everything has been uploaded, and the application is complete, we might review that application before the January 31st deadline. So you might get an offer maybe a week or so before the January 31st deadline, but most, I would say 90% of the applications will be reviewed after the deadline. That's for MDS Vancouver. I don't know if Okanagan or CL are a little bit different.
Yeah, a little bit, but not vastly different. I mean, we don't do the sort of random version of it. We actually do basically review them in the order that they're received to us from the College of Graduate Studies, which is a little bit of a different middleman than on the Vancouver campus.
Right. Mika, you have anything to add, or you're good?
Yeah, that's essentially the same process we have, so we don't do the randomization either.
Okay, sounds good. Great. Some questions from international students. When reviewing applications, do you view international and domestic students differently? I think the answer is no, right?
Yeah, effectively the answer is no, yeah. We have sort of tried to strike a balance in terms of the cohort diversity in a few different ways, but overall it's merit-based, and we ended up with a higher percentage of international students this year on our campus than we had in any previous years because the international applicant pool was so strong last year. So
yeah, I think for MDS Vancouver, just to jump in, we want the best students in our program. It doesn't matter if you're domestic or international. If you have a really great application, you'll get an offer. So we don't really look at whether you're international or domestic. Okay, I see some nods. So let's go to the next question. Are there any additional requirements for international students? I think the answer is just IELTS and TOEFL. So again, if your past degree was not from a university where English was the language of instruction, you need to submit an IELTS or TOEFL score, an official IELTS or TOEFL score, and upload it to your application. And the minimum requirements are listed on our website. And be careful, the minimum requirements are a little bit different from Vancouver versus Okanagan, I believe. So make sure you know that. The next question about TOEFL and IELTS is whether multiple attempts can be combined. And I think I can speak to that as well. I think we accept your last score. So whatever your last score was that you upload, that's the one that we will go with. The next question is about the non-refundable deposit. On acceptance into the program, students will be required to pay a $3,000 Canadian non-refundable deposit. My question is, what if the student visa has not been permitted or received, I guess? Should I answer that one as well? Okay. So yes, there is actually a good chance that maybe you haven't received your study permit yet. When you receive an offer, you have to actually wait before you apply for a study permit in order to get an offer. And in order to accept your offer, you have to pay that $3,000 deposit. So once you accept the offer and pay the $3,000 deposit, at that time, you will also apply for a study permit. And it might take a while for you to hear back from the government about your study permit, whether you get your study permit or not. And of course, hopefully you will get your study permit and you will just join the program in September. But in those maybe rare cases that your study permit, you don't get your study permit in time, then there is an option for you to defer to the year after. But again, most people will receive their study permit before the program starts. So that's, I think, the answer. Anything different at Okanagan, Jeff?
No, that's operationally how I would say we've dealt with that, which we haven't had to deal with very often. Of course, there's been a lot of oddities over the last couple of years, but I don't think that particular case has happened more than maybe once. But yeah, so yeah, it's an effective deferment of sorts. Yeah.
Great. So here's the question about scholarships and financial assistance. We're kind of switching into scholarships and financial aid questions. So I just want to mention from the UBC Vancouver perspective that we have scholarships for domestic students and international students, and students from background, Indigenous background, or First Nations background, or visible minority or Black students. So we have those scholarships available. Those are entry scholarships, so you don't have to apply for the specific scholarship. So you will be automatically considered for these scholarships as you apply for the program with your regular application. And if you get one of these scholarships, on the offer letter that you receive, there will be a mention of the scholarship and the amount of the scholarship. The other thing that UBC Vancouver has, or MDS Vancouver has, is a bursary, and Joel kind of mentioned that already. So that's for domestic students who also are in receipt of a student loan. And if you get a student loan and there is an unmet need on that student loan, so let's say you apply for a student loan and you say, I need $10,000 to take this program, and the government says, we'll give you $8,000. So you have a $2,000 unmet need. So if you have an unmet need, you're also eligible to apply for a bursary. And the bursary that we have is a pot of money that depends on how many students we have in the program. And then that money will be available to students who apply to that bursary. So those are the different financial aid options that we have at MDS Vancouver. Jeff or Mika, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, structurally, we have the same sort of bursary setup. I think that's exactly the same format that we've got here. I've not actually dealt with it personally, so I don't know. The scholarships, we've got entrance scholarships as well. I think historically we've given out about 5 per year over the last, at least while I've been principal co-director, and we'll be looking to do that, or perhaps a little bit more this year. Also will be in the offer letter.
Great.
Yeah, we also have bursaries, and then we have scholarships both for domestic and international students. How we distribute those has varied a little bit from year to year. I'm not entirely sure what we'll do this year with the scholarship, but sometimes we've distributed it sort of to all the students, and sometimes it's gone to sort of individual students. You know.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the next question was about how do you award scholarships, and I think we've talked about that. Let's talk a little bit about a background of people that want to apply to the program and the prereqs. So the first question is, what are the Prereq courses?
I think those are the same across all 3 programs, I believe, but I can jump in and say it's basically an intro stats course, an intro computer science course, and your sort of intro calc type course. So I mean, you can see in the website explicitly what we're looking for in terms of those courses, but very broadly, that's how I would summarize it.
Yes. So yeah, just a little bit more detail. So we're looking for an intro, calculus, linear algebra, intro to programming, and an intro to statistics or probability. And there are Vanessa just posted them in the chat. Can courses from websites like Coursera or Udemy be used to fulfill the prerequisite course requirements?
I can jump in there. I think in general, we think it's okay if you have like maybe one of those. If all of them are from Udemy, Coursera, all the prereqs, it can be a little bit hard to assess how proficient you are in these areas, because those are not necessarily graded as strictly, and it might just be like a pass-fail type of certificate that you get. But if you're filling in some gap with a online MOOC course, totally okay. If you use that for all your prereqs, we usually want to see something else to be able to assess how good you are in those skills.
Yeah, in past years, we've also accepted sort of individual prereq courses that were MOOCs, but in general, we don't take students who have all MOOCs for their prerequisites unless it's a special case.
I don't think on the Okanagan campus we've ever permitted one of those style of courses in replacement, I guess, of a prerequisite. But I will say that it doesn't hurt an application to see those things on there when it's, you haven't taken your intro stats in 8 years or something like that, and or maybe even worse on the computer science side, because things have changed a fair amount in that amount of time. So we do like to see those things in the application to, again, sort of show some clarity that you're moving in the sort of quantitative direction. But yeah, I don't think we've historically allowed a replacement.
Just to add to what Joel said about for MDS Vancouver, so we do get a lot of applications, so it is a very competitive program. So if you are missing a prereq and you want to fill it, make up for it with a MOOC, then you're already behind, because we do get a lot of applicants who have all 4 courses and they've taken them and they have a transcript with a grade that shows, and it's easy for us to assess how well they did in the prerequisites. So if you are missing one of those prerequisite courses and you want to fill them with a MOOC, that it's hard for us to assess, because we don't know if you've attended all the classes online, or if you've just watched some videos, how well you did, those kind of things. So it is difficult to get accepted in the program if you're missing one, even if you are replacing them with a MOOC. So that's just off the bat. And the other question is, Vanessa just posted in the chat. So if I've taken the prereqs 10 years ago at UBC, are they still valid for admissions? So yes, if you've taken the prerequisite, even if they're 10 years ago, they're still valid for admissions. But as Jeff was saying, we probably want to see how you've kept yourself up to date. So if you've taken a programming course 10 years ago and then that's it, then that's a red flag. So we want to see that you've maybe taken an online course to refresh your knowledge in programming or statistics or math, more recently.
Yeah, I'll jump in just to add a little something else on that. I mean, obviously, if you're doing programming on a day-to-day basis in your job, then we don't need to see that. Yeah, you're then upgrading your intro computer science. But if you're doing something completely unrelated to these things, either from an industry or academic standpoint, then yeah, we would start to say, well, okay, are they going to be ready to jump into an intensive program based on what I'm looking in the application. And there may be some questions with that if it's been 10 years since you've passed a course.
Yeah. So in general, I usually tell students or applicants, prospective students, if put yourself into the shoes of the admissions committee, the person reading your application, and if there's any questions about anything on your application in your mind, it's going to be a question in our minds as well. So try to answer that question, whether it's in the personal statement or somewhere else on your application. So I've taken the prerequisite 10 years ago, but I've done programming, the programming prerequisite 10 years ago, but I've done it on a daily basis in my job. So that removes the question in our mind. So try to remove all the questions from our mind, basically.
I think that also goes for the sort of grade. So if your grade is sort of on the lower end of what we accept, then it would be good to explain how you still have the required skills.
Yes, remove the questions. If there's a question about grades, try to remove them in your application from our minds. Still about prerequisites. Can you expand on what meets the coding prereq, as I will be taking a course to satisfy the prereq? So the question is whether they have to take it at UBC, or can they take distance learning or extended learning courses to meet the prereq?
I think it depends on potentially the framework of that extended learning or distance learning course. If it's a 3-credit undergraduate equivalent that you could use as a transfer credit at any school, then in my opinion, it's fine. But a lot of those are not full 3-credit transfer equivalents, right? So you got to be a little bit careful on that.
Yeah. So I always say, if you get a transcript with an official transcript with a grade on it, and it's a 3-credit course, then it's good. But if you just get a certificate of completion or something like that, then it's probably not. It probably doesn't meet the prereq requirement. Okay. So the other question is about the timing of taking the prereqs. So can you take them after you've submitted your application, or while you're submitting your application, so you don't have the final grade yet by the time we may be reviewing your application?
I think we only consider that if the application is really outstanding and we really want to admit that person. We might follow up with them afterwards, but otherwise we need to see it up front. Is that correct, Milad?
Yeah, so for Vancouver, so there's 4 prerequisite courses that you have to take. So if you haven't taken any of them and you're applying for the program, and we have to wait until maybe July or June or May, whatever it is, to get your final grades, then it's difficult for us to assess your application. But if you've already taken maybe 3 of them and you just have to have 1 more to take, and you did really well in the first 3, we, as an admissions committee, we can be relatively confident that you'll probably do well in the 4th one as well. So you probably, if the rest of your application is great, you might get a conditional offer, and one of the conditions being that you do well in your final prerequisite course. So you have to send us the grade of your final course, and then we'll remove the condition on your offer, and you get an unconditional offer from us. So the answer is, there's 4 courses. If you still need to take 1 or maybe 2, then we can give you a conditional offer. Is that the same for CL and Okanagan?
Yeah, exactly the same for CL. So we have extended these conditional offers. For example, if someone's missing their calculus course, but they've got all the other ones. So yeah.
I actually don't think we've ever done a conditional offer under that kind of circumstance. I could be wrong on that, but I don't remember any. That doesn't mean that we couldn't do that if we judged the application to be worthy of that. But the one thing I would note, we often get questions, as the process is ongoing in February and March and whatnot about, well, can I update my application because I have this prereq now or whatever, and we generally don't allow that. So what's submitted in, by January 31st is what we're reviewing, and it's not fair to other applicants for us to sort of update ones that people send in. So just be aware of that.
Yes, that's a good point. Okay, I'm just looking at the list. The next one we've already answered. How much does work experience affect the decision of admission? Mika, you're nodding. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, when I review these applications, I do pay attention to the work experience. So if someone can show that they worked on NLP projects, maybe at a company or even sort of as part of their studies, it's something that we do value. But that being said, we do accept a lot of students who don't have work experience in NLP.
Great. Joel or Jeff?
Yes. Similar answer, I guess. We certainly value it from an admissions standpoint. We like to see somebody, I guess it doesn't really matter what the work experience is in some sense, but usually where they're sort of realizing that the data science aspects to gaps in where they're trying to progress in their career. So it's not necessarily data science work experience, but just that, the path that they've gone on is bringing them in this direction. It's, I guess, less often that you see that from coming straight out of an undergraduate degree, though not impossible. We certainly have admitted plenty of students that, on their research project from psychology, they started to realize that what they were really interested in was the coding and the statistics associated with it, and that's why they're coming our direction. So both of those are sort of valid experiences that we're kind of looking for in some sense. So the work is one way to sort of show that.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. I always tell prospective students, work experience helps because it can sometimes identify gaps in your knowledge. So for example, if you are a biology student and you've worked in a biology lab and you realize in the lab they're collecting all this data, but nobody really knows what to do with it, and you want to be the person to show them what you can do with all this data, then you're an excellent candidate for the program. So even though maybe you don't have formal work experience, you've done some volunteering in a lab or you've done some work with a professor in a lab, if you can show us that in your application that this is why you want to study data science, that's actually a plus, I think. Okay, the next question, let me see here. So let's get into more program-specific questions. So one of them is, why fit the entire course within 10 months instead of the usual 2 years?
So we chatted a little bit about this before also, and essentially the idea here is that we want people who come from work, who are taking like some time to study, that they don't take 2 years of their work experience. So the program is accelerated to be able to accommodate people who are looking to further their knowledge without taking a full 2 years out of their current career. So that was kind of the original motivation, I think. And then it's also been attractive in general that you can compress these topics and learn them in a single year instead of 2.
Yeah, and the program is very fast-paced and intensive. So it's not like you lose out because it's a 10-month program and not 2 years. It's just that it means that for 10 months, all you think about is data science. So it's nobody has come to us and said, oh, this program was too easy. So it's a very challenging program, and you have to be prepared for that. So make sure that you know when you apply to the program that basically for 10 months, you don't have time to do anything else in your life. That's what other students have been telling us. So what are the differences between MDS and CL, Mika?
Well, I guess sort of the principal difference is that CL is language focused. So we do NLP mainly. Of course, the fall in the program is shared with P. So we essentially do almost all of the same courses in the fall. But then in the spring, we basically focus on natural language processing. So learning all sorts of techniques, machine learning and other techniques to work with language. And we have a pretty strong focus on deep learning methods. So we do mostly deep learning in the spring, even though we do sort of aim to give students a pretty broad understanding of the techniques that are used in the NLP field. But yeah, and deep learning is our sort of principal focus.
Thank you. And Jeff, what are the differences between the Okanagan and the Vancouver programs?
Right. So there's a, let's say, huge amount of overlap in terms of the course content between the two campuses, although the sort of namings and whatnot are a little bit different in the calendar and whatnot. But the where the modules differ, we have an optimization course that's fairly heavily mathematically focused because we have a world-class math optimization research group here on this campus. It's a smaller campus. We've got a smaller cohort size, and those are the primary differences, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question about whether there's an advantage or disadvantage about applying to the 3 different programs. And I can, because we only have 8 minutes left, I can keep it short and say no. So the 3 admissions committees operate completely separate from each other. And so you can, if you wanted to, you can apply for the 3 programs separately. For CL, I would say make sure that you don't submit the same application for CL, because you have to show an interest in language and why you want to apply for MDS, specifically in computational linguistics. But other than that, feel free to apply to all 3 programs if you wanted to. So a little bit more specific about computational linguistics, Mika, what methods of computational linguistics are used?
Yeah, so as I sort of already said, we do try to give students a pretty broad overview of the different methods that are used. But in the spring, we do have this fairly heavy focus on the sort of modern deep learning methods that are very commonly used in the NLP field nowadays. So yeah, that's our focus: machine learning through deep learning.
Great, thank you. So what do you think is the most important thing, or what are some important things to do before entering the program? So let's say you've received an offer and maybe you've accepted the offer and you want to start in September. You know that it's a very intensive, fast-paced, difficult program. How should you prepare for that?
So I can maybe say for CL, I would practice coding because what we've noticed is that students who have a fairly strong sort of or are strong at coding are going to have an easier time in the program. So that's something I would maybe focus on.
as a statistician, I will jump in and pay lip service to statistics. We do find that is an area that the students, especially those not coming out with a statistics degree, which are the majority of students in the program, they've had some time since they've thought about things like random variables and whatnot. And yes, we're going to start at about that level, but we're going to move very quickly. So it usually helps for students to review some of those things, as they're sort of preparing for the program.
Yeah, I think those are the most common struggles that students have in the MDS Vancouver as well. And I would kind of combine Mika's and Jeff's suggestions and say that, have an honest look at yourself and think about where you're weak in terms of the prerequisite areas and brush up on those. And yes, it's usually either programming or like stats probabilities in the beginning of MDS Vancouver, where students do feel like it's very fast paced and they struggle.
Yeah. And one thing, it's kind of separate from the academics, I would also say this is a 10-month intensive full-time program. So let's say if you have kids, make sure that you're prepared, that you have childcare, because some classes start at 8 in the morning. So what are you going to do with your kids at 8 in the morning when you have to go to class? Because this is another question was about whether it's online or in person. So this is 100% full-time in-person program. So aside from academics and practicing coding and statistics and those kind of things, make sure that you have the next 10 months of your life in order. Because if something in your life is not right and you can't 100% focus on the program, you will struggle. So make sure that you think about that as well. We have only a few minutes left. I wanted to kind of squeeze in some career and job related questions. So one of the questions is, what support is provided to help students find a job after graduation?
I'll jump in, I guess. The question, was the question specific to after graduation? We have a sort of a support system of career advisors in the programs that sort of guide you in things like resume creation and how to set up things like that, interview prep, and we have a lot of programming surrounding that. And then we have a pretty large alumni network now amongst the 2 campuses and 3 programs that students get to rely on, I guess, post-graduation. Formal supports after graduation, though, aren't there in terms of, we're not placing you into a position or guaranteeing anything like that. I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah, so we do have, as Jeff said, a dedicated career advisors for the program, which will also be for alumni if they wanted to. After you graduate, if you wanted to come and meet with the career advisor, you're basically have access to them for life, I would say. But hopefully, you don't need access to them for life. The other thing I would say is that the career advisor also reaches out to alumni and other industry partners and invites them to do talks about career options, job search, how to get jobs within their organizations, what interesting data science projects they do, and what skills and tools they use in their companies. So we have a lot of talks, and also capstone, I would say. That's something that you definitely can put on your resume. It's a project that you do in the last 2 months of the program. Basically you learn a lot of skills. You get industry experience from your capstone project, and some students get jobs with their capstone partners as well. So that's another support that we have and that you can use in the program. The final question is about the current state of the economy. How would the current layoffs affect people who are aspiring to pursue data science? since a lot of people are being laid off, strictly focus on data-driven technologies. To end it on a not very positive note, but we can make it a positive ending. I can start by saying that the other thing actually that we do have related to the last question, we also have a mentoring program for the UBC, for the MDS Vancouver program. We also have a mentoring program. Basically, last week, a couple of weeks ago, we had an event with all the mentors. And one of the questions that came up from the students to the mentors was, what about this recession that we're in? And what about these layoffs that are happening? And basically, the mentors agreed that data science is a little bit different because data scientists work in all industries and all fields. So even if there's a recession and some industries are down, there's always other industries that are up that do well in recessions, and they also need data scientists. So the general consensus was, and this is not from me, this is from the mentors that are working out in industry, the general consensus was that we shouldn't worry too much about the recent layoffs and the recession, because there's always going to be a need for data scientists. There's going to be a need for data scientists who have the skills, who can meet the skills, the demands of the skills that are in demand in industry.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, which I think you got at, but I think what's been in the news a lot is with the tech layoffs, but that is not the only place where data scientists go and work. So yeah, I would agree. Yeah,
exactly. Thank you. Great. So let's wrap it up here. We're 2 minutes over. Thank you, everyone who attended the admissions question and answer session. Thank you to our panelists, Jeff, Mika, and Joel. If you have any other questions, you can always email our respective email addresses, our general email addresses, and someone will get back to you. Good luck in submitting your applications, and hopefully we will see you in the program in September. Thanks, everyone.